The morning sun cast long shadows across the naval base as Marcus Rodriguez adjusted his civilian clothes and checked his visitor badge one more time. At 42, he looked like any other middle-aged man walking through the gates of Naval Special Warfare Command in Coronado. His weathered hands and the slight limp in his left leg were the only hints that he might be more than just another supporter visiting the base. Marcus had been coming to these events for 3 years now. Ever since his nephew Danny joined the Navy and expressed interest in becoming a SEAL, Marcus had thrown himself into supporting the teams. He organized fundraisers in his hometown of San Diego, collected care packages, and attended every public event he could. The active duty SEALs knew him by face, though most assumed he was just another enthusiastic civilian who had watched too many movies. "Hey, Marcus," called out Petty Officer First Class Johnson from across the parking lot. "You here for the Family Day barbecue?" Marcus waved back with a smile. "Wouldn't miss it, Johnson. How's the new class of tadpoles doing?" Johnson jogged over, his dress uniform crisp despite the California heat. "Tough as always. We lost another 12 last week during Hell Week. But the ones who remain are solid." He paused, studying Marcus's face. I've been meaning to ask you something. You seem to know a lot about our training, our operations, more than most civilians. What's your background?" This question came up occasionally. Marcus always deflected it with humor or changed the subject. Today was no different. "Just a guy who reads a lot and respects what you all do," he replied with his usual easy smile. "My nephew Danny is hoping to make it through selection next year." "Right, Danny Rodriguez. Good kid. He's got the physical tools, but we'll see if he has the mental toughness." Johnson glanced at his watch. "I better get going. The Admiral's supposed to be here today for some big announcement." Marcus nodded and continued toward the event area. Admiral Sarah Chun was legendary in the SEAL community. She had broken barriers as one of the first women to command a special operations unit, and her tactical innovations had saved countless lives in operations around the world. Marcus had never met her, but he certainly knew her reputation. The barbecue area was already filling with families, active duty personnel, and various supporters like himself. Marcus grabbed a plate and got in line behind a group of wives whose husbands were currently deployed overseas. He listened to their conversations about the challenges of military life, the constant worry, the pride they felt in their husband's service. "Excuse me," said a voice behind him. Marcus turned to see Chief Petty Officer Williams, a man he'd met several times at these events. "You're Marcus Rodriguez, right? The guy who organized that huge care package drive last Christmas." "That's me," Marcus confirmed, moving forward in the line. "That was incredible, man. The guys overseas couldn't stop talking about those packages. You had stuff in there that we couldn't even get through regular supply channels. How did you manage that?" Marcus shrugged. "Just called in some favors, knew some people in the logistics business." He didn't mention that his logistics contacts included former Special Forces operators who ran private security companies, or that his knowledge of what supplies were needed came from his own extensive experience in unconventional warfare. Chief Williams was about to ask another question when a commotion near the main pavilion caught everyone's attention. Admiral Chun had arrived, and she was making her way through the crowd, stopping to talk with families and shake hands with the enlisted men. Marcus watched from a distance as the Admiral worked the crowd. She had an easy manner with people, but he could see the sharp intelligence in her eyes, the way she assessed everything around her even in this relaxed setting. She was exactly what he'd expected based on her reputation. "Attention everyone," called out the base commander, Captain Morrison. "Admiral Chun has a special announcement to make." The crowd gathered around as Admiral Chun stepped up to the microphone that had been set up near the grilling area. "Thank you all for being here today," she began, her voice carrying easily across the assembly. "I wanted to share some exciting news with our SEAL families and supporters. We've received approval for a new training facility that will better prepare our teams for the complex challenges they face in modern warfare." She went on to describe the facility, its advanced simulation capabilities, and how it would enhance the already rigorous SEAL training program. Marcus listened with professional interest, noting details that others might miss about the tactical implications of what she was describing. After the announcement, Admiral Chun began making her way through the crowd again, this time stopping for longer conversations with various people. Marcus was finishing his barbecue when he noticed she was heading in his direction. "Mr. Rodriguez," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Admiral Chen. I understand you've been a tremendous supporter of our teams." Marcus shook her hand, surprised that she knew his name. "Just doing my small part, Admiral. These men deserve all the support they can get. I've heard about your fundraising efforts, and Captain Morrison tells me you've been incredibly generous with your time and resources." She paused, her eyes studying his face with the same intensity he'd noticed earlier. "I'm curious about your background. You seem to have an unusually deep understanding of our operations and needs." This was the moment Marcus had been hoping to avoid. He'd managed to stay under the radar for 3 years, supporting the teams while keeping his own past carefully hidden. "I'm just a businessman who believes in supporting our military, Admiral." Admiral Chen smiled, but it was the kind of smile that suggested she wasn't buying his explanation. "What kind of business are you in, Mr. Rodriguez?" "Import-export," Marcus replied, which was technically true. His company did handle imports and exports, though much of that business involved supplying equipment to government contractors and private security firms. "Interesting." Admiral Chun glanced around at the crowd, then back at Marcus. "Would you mind if we spoke privately for a few minutes? I'd like to discuss a potential opportunity that might interest someone with your obvious dedication to supporting special operations." Marcus felt a familiar tightness in his chest. He'd worked hard to build his civilian life, to put his past behind him, and find a way to serve that didn't involve carrying a weapon or making life and death decisions in foreign countries. But he couldn't refuse a direct request from an admiral, especially not in front of all these people. "Of course, Admiral." She led him away from the crowd toward a quieter area near the base of the nearby helicopter hangar. Other people were walking around, but they were far enough from the main group to speak without being overheard. "Mr. Rodriguez," Admiral Chen began, "in my experience, people don't develop the kind of detailed knowledge you seem to possess about special operations just from reading books and watching movies. The way you organized those care packages, the specific items you included, the understanding you've shown of our training requirements, it all suggests someone with first-hand experience." Marcus remained silent, unsure how to respond without revealing more than he wanted to. Admiral Chan continued, "I also noticed the way you carry yourself, the way your eyes constantly scan your surroundings, the fact that you instinctively positioned yourself with your back to the hangar wall during our conversation. These are habits that are hard to break, even years after leaving active service." She was good, Marcus had to admit. Very good. But he still wasn't ready to open that door. "I'm not sure what you're getting at, Admiral." "I think you do." Her voice was gentle but firm, "and I think you might be exactly the kind of person we need for a very special project. But I can't discuss it with someone whose background I don't fully understand." Marcus looked out across the base, watching young sailors and SEALs going about their duties. He thought about his nephew Danny, about all the men and women who were preparing to put their lives on the line in service of their country. He thought about the 3 years he'd spent trying to contribute in small ways while hiding who he really was. "Admiral," he said finally, "with all due respect, some doors are better left closed. I've found a way to serve that works for me, and I prefer to keep things as they are." Admiral Chen nodded slowly. "I understand, Mr. Rodriguez. But sometimes circumstances require us to open doors we'd rather keep closed. Sometimes the mission is more important than our personal preferences." Before Marcus could respond, Chief Williams appeared around the corner of the hangar. "Admiral Chen, I'm sorry to interrupt, but you have an urgent call from SOCOM headquarters." "Thank you, Chief." Admiral Chen turned back to Marcus. "Mr. Rodriguez, would you be willing to meet with me tomorrow morning? I'd like to continue our conversation." Marcus hesitated, but found himself nodding. "What time?" 0800, in my office at the Naval Special Warfare Command building. "And Mr. Rodriguez, you might want to give some thought tonight to exactly how you want to answer my questions." As Admiral Chun walked away with Chief Williams, Marcus stood alone by the hangar, feeling the weight of a past he'd tried so hard to leave behind pressing down on his shoulders. He'd known this day would come eventually. You can't support the special operations community for 3 years without someone eventually noticing that you know too much, understand too well, and care too deeply. Marcus made his way back to the barbecue, but the carefree atmosphere he'd enjoyed earlier was gone. People still greeted him warmly, still thanked him for his support, but now he felt like he was wearing a mask that was starting to slip. Petty Officer Johnson found him near the dessert table. "Hey, Marcus, you look like you've seen a ghost. Everything okay?" "Just tired," Marcus replied. "It's been a long day. Tell me about it." "Hey, did you hear about the new training facility the Admiral announced? Sounds pretty amazing. With your knowledge of our operations, I bet you could give them some great input on what equipment to include." Marcus forced a smile. "I'm sure they have plenty of experts for that kind of thing." But even as he said it, Marcus knew that Johnson was right. He did have knowledge that could be valuable. Knowledge gained through years of planning and executing operations in some of the most dangerous places on Earth. Knowledge that came with a cost he was still paying even 3 years after retiring from a job that officially didn't exist. The rest of the barbecue passed in a blur. Marcus went through the motions of socializing, but his mind was already focused on tomorrow's meeting with Admiral Chun. He could continue to deflect, continue to maintain his cover as just another enthusiastic supporter. Or he could finally acknowledge what everyone was starting to suspect: that Marcus Rodriguez, successful businessman and SEAL supporter, had once been someone else entirely. As he walked back to his car, Marcus caught sight of a group of young sailors practicing close-quarters combat techniques on a training mat set up near the parking area. Their instructor was calling out corrections, pushing them to move faster, think quicker, react more decisively. Watching them, Marcus felt a familiar pull, the same feeling that had led him to join the military 24 years ago. These young warriors deserved the best training, the best equipment, the best leadership possible. If Admiral Chun had a project that could help them survive and succeed in their missions, how could he turn his back on that? How could he let his desire for a quiet civilian life outweigh the potential to save lives? Marcus got in his car and drove home through the familiar streets of San Diego. But for the first time in 3 years, he felt like a stranger in his own life. Tomorrow, he would have to decide whether to remain Marcus Rodriguez' supporter and fundraiser, or to reveal the identity he'd worked so hard to bury. The sun was setting over the Pacific as he pulled into his driveway, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. It was beautiful and peaceful, everything he'd wanted when he'd chosen this life. But peace, Marcus was beginning to realize, might be a luxury he could no longer afford. Marcus arrived at the Naval Special Warfare Command building 15 minutes early, a habit that died hard even after 3 years of civilian life. The security checkpoint was more thorough than usual, and he noticed additional personnel stationed around the building. Something was happening, something that required elevated security measures. Admiral Chen's aide, a young lieutenant named Foster, escorted Marcus through corridors lined with photographs of SEAL operations dating back to World War II. Marcus recognized some of the locations in the more recent photos, though he'd never be able to admit that publicly. "The Admiral is finishing up a secure call," Lieutenant Foster explained as they reached the outer office. "She should be with you in just a few minutes. Can I get you coffee?" "Black, thank you." Marcus studied the commendations and awards displayed on the walls while he waited. Admiral Chen's career progression was impressive even by Navy standards. Multiple combat deployments, advanced degrees in strategic studies and international relations, command positions that traditionally went to men. She'd earned every one of those ribbons and medals. "Mr. Rodriguez?" Admiral Chun emerged from her inner office, extending her hand in greeting. "Thank you for coming. Please come in." Her office was functional rather than decorated, with maps of global hotspots covering one wall and secure communication equipment occupying most of her desk. She gestured to a small conference table near the window overlooking the training areas where future SEALs were already running morning PT. "I appreciate you taking time from your business to meet with me," Admiral Chin began, settling into her chair. "I hope you don't mind, but I took the liberty of doing some research on your import-export company." Marcus kept his expression neutral. That's understandable, given the nature of your responsibilities. Rodriguez International Trading has some very interesting clients, Admiral Chen continued. Several defense contractors, a few companies that specialize in tactical equipment, and what appears to be a lucrative relationship with firms that provide security services in unstable regions. She opened a folder that had been sitting on the table. Your company also has an unusually good track record of delivering specialized equipment on extremely short notice to locations that most legitimate businesses would consider too dangerous to operate in. Marcus remained silent, though he could feel the walls of his carefully constructed civilian identity beginning to crumble. Admiral Chen leaned forward slightly. What really caught my attention was a shipment your company facilitated 18 months ago. Medical supplies and communications equipment that somehow made it to a remote village in Syria just hours before a humanitarian crisis erupted. The timing was remarkably precise for a civilian businessman working with publicly available information. Sometimes you get lucky with logistics, Marcus replied, knowing how weak it sounded. Yes, sometimes you do. Admiral Chen's tone suggested she wasn't buying it. But this level of luck requires the kind of intelligence network and operational planning capability that most civilians don't possess. She turned to another page in the folder. I also noticed that Marcus Rodriguez didn't exist in any official capacity before 19 years ago. No birth certificate, no school records, no employment history. Very thorough identity construction, very professional. The kind of work that takes serious resources and expertise. Marcus felt sweat beginning to form on his forehead, despite the air conditioning. Admiral, I'm not sure what you're implying, but I'm not implying anything, Mr. Rodriguez. I'm stating facts. Admiral Chen closed the folder. The question is whether you're going to continue pretending to be someone you're not, or whether you're going to trust me with the truth so we can discuss why you're really here. The silence stretched between them for nearly a minute. Marcus stared out the window at the young sailors going through their morning routine, thinking about all the operations he'd participated in, all the times his team had depended on accurate intelligence and reliable support. Admiral Chen had done her homework, and she'd done it well. Continuing to lie would be pointless and potentially insulting to her intelligence. What exactly do you want to know, Admiral? I want to know who you really are, what your background is, and why someone with your obvious capabilities has been content to play the role of enthusiastic civilian supporter for 3 years. Marcus took a deep breath. This was the moment he'd been dreading since the day he'd decided to create his new identity. My real name is Master Chief Petty Officer Marcus Santos. I served 21 years with Naval Special Warfare Development Group. My last operation was in eastern Afghanistan, and I was medically retired after taking shrapnel from an IED that killed 2 of my teammates. Admiral Chen's expression didn't change, but Marcus could see recognition in her eyes. DevGru doesn't officially exist, Master Chief. No, ma'am, it doesn't. What was your primary specialty? Counterterrorism operations, hostage rescue, and direct action missions. I also served as a liaison with intelligence agencies for mission planning and assessment. Admiral Chen nodded slowly. That explains your knowledge of our operational requirements and your ability to source specialized equipment. She paused. Why the new identity? Medical retirement doesn't usually require that level of operational security. Marcus looked down at his hands. This was the part he'd hoped never to discuss with anyone. After the IED incident, I spent 8 months in rehabilitation. During that time, families of my teammates who had been killed in previous operations started receiving threats. Someone had leaked operational details and team member identities to hostile groups who were targeting our families for revenge. I see. The threats against my family were credible enough that the Navy offered to help me disappear. New identity, new location, enough money to start over completely. The alternative was living the rest of my life wondering when someone might come after my nephew or my sister. Marcus met Admiral Chengesh. I chose to disappear. Admiral Chun was quiet for a moment, processing what he'd told her. But you couldn't stay away from the community entirely. No, ma'am. After about 6 months of playing golf and pretending to be a regular businessman, I was going crazy. I needed to find a way to serve that didn't put my family at risk. Supporting the teams as a civilian seemed like a reasonable compromise. And it worked well until yesterday when I started asking questions. Yes, ma'am. Admiral Chun stood and walked to the window, looking down at the training areas. Master Chief Santos, what I'm about to discuss with you is classified at the highest levels. If you choose not to participate in what I'm going to propose, this conversation never happened, and you can go back to being Marcus Rodriguez, civilian supporter. Are we clear? Yes, ma'am. She returned to the table and pulled out a different folder, this one with classification markings that Marcus recognized all too well. 3 weeks ago, intelligence services identified a new terrorist organization that's specifically targeting families and support networks of special operations personnel. They're not just making threats. They've already carried out attacks against family members in 3 different countries. Marcus felt cold dread settling in his stomach. How bad? Bad enough that we're implementing emergency security protocols for all SEAL families. Bad enough that we need someone with your background and current civilian cover to help coordinate protective measures without revealing the extent of the threat. Admiral Chin opened the folder and showed him photographs of attack sites, intelligence reports, and surveillance images of suspected terrorists. These people have access to operational details that should be impossible for them to obtain. They know team compositions, family structures, even safe house locations that are known only to the most senior intelligence officials. You think there's a leak. We know there's a leak. What we don't know is where it's coming from or how extensive it is. We need someone who understands our operations, but exists outside our official command structure to help identify and neutralize the source. Marcus studied the photographs, his trained eye automatically analyzing tactical details and operational signatures. What exactly are you asking me to do? I'm asking Master Chief Petty Officer Marcus Santos to come back from retirement for one final mission. You'll maintain your Marcus Rodriguez identity as cover, but you'll have access to resources and intelligence that will allow you to investigate this leak while coordinating security for SEAL families. And if I say no, Admiral Chin's expression was serious. Then you go back to your life, and we'll try to handle this through official channels. But, Master Chief, you know as well as I do that official channels have already been compromised. These terrorists are always one step ahead of us because they have inside information. Marcus looked out the window again, watching the young sailors who reminded him of himself 25 years ago. They were training to become part of a brotherhood that demanded everything and gave meaning in return. If someone was targeting their families, threatening the people they loved most, then every one of those young warriors would be distracted and potentially compromised during missions. What kind of authority would I have? Complete operational authority over family protection details. Unlimited budget for security measures. Direct access to intelligence from all agencies. And, most importantly, the ability to operate outside normal protocols when necessary. Timeline. We need an answer today. The threat is escalating, and we've received intelligence suggesting another attack is being planned within the next few weeks. Marcus was quiet for several minutes, weighing his options. 3 years ago, he'd walked away from this world because staying in it had become too dangerous for the people he loved. Now, walking away might be even more dangerous. Admiral, he said finally, if I do this, I need 2 guarantees. First, my real identity stays compartmentalized. Only the people who absolutely need to know should know who I really am. Second, if we identify and neutralize this leak, I get to go back to being Marcus Rodriguez permanently. Done. And one more thing. I want my nephew Danny kept out of SEAL training until this is resolved. If there's a leak in the program, I don't want him anywhere near it. Admiral Chin nodded. I can arrange for his training to be delayed for medical reasons. He'll never know why. Marcus extended his hand across the table. Then, Master Chief Santos reports for duty, Admiral. As they shook hands, Admiral Chin smiled for the first time since their conversation began. Welcome back, Master Chief. Your first briefing is in 30 minutes with representatives from NSA, CIA, and FBI. They'll bring you up to speed on everything we know about the terrorists targeting our families. Understood. And, Admiral, thank you for not giving up when I tried to deflect your questions yesterday. Master Chief, in my experience, the people who try hardest to avoid responsibility are often the ones best qualified to handle it. You spent 3 years proving you care about these teams. Now you'll have the chance to prove you can protect them. As Marcus left Admiral Chen's office, he felt the familiar weight of operational responsibility settling on his shoulders. For 3 years, he'd been Marcus Rodriguez, successful businessman and enthusiastic supporter. Starting today, he was Master Chief Santos again, with all the dangers and obligations that identity carried. But for the first time since his retirement, Marcus felt like he was exactly where he needed to be. The intelligence briefing took place in a secure conference room 3 levels below ground, accessible only through multiple security checkpoints and biometric scanners. Marcus hadn't been in a facility like this since his retirement, and the familiar atmosphere of controlled paranoia brought back memories he'd worked hard to suppress. Around the conference table sat representatives from every major intelligence agency involved in counterterrorism operations. Admiral Chun made the introductions, though Marcus noticed she referred to him only as our liaison for family protection operations without mentioning his real identity or background. Gentlemen, ladies, Admiral Chun began, our liaison will be coordinating all security measures for SEAL family members. He has my complete confidence and unlimited authority to implement whatever measures he deems necessary. CIA Representative Sandra Walsh, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, opened the briefing with overhead photos of the 3 previous attack sites. The organization calls itself the Return Blade, and they've demonstrated sophisticated intelligence gathering capabilities that suggest professional training and inside access to classified information. The first attack had targeted the family of a SEAL Team 6 operator in Virginia Beach. The terrorists had known the exact route the operator's wife took to pick up their children from school, had identified the specific coffee shop she visited afterward, and had planted an IED that killed her and wounded 4 civilians. The second attack occurred in San Diego, where the elderly parents of SEAL were shot in their home by intruders who knew exactly when the son would be overseas on a classified mission, ensuring maximum psychological impact. The third attack was in Colorado Springs, where the sister of a recently killed SEAL operator was kidnapped from her workplace, tortured for information about other family members, and then executed. Her body was found with a note warning that more family members would die unless Special Operations Forces stopped interfering with God's will. FBI Counterterrorism Specialist Agent David Chun, no relation to Admiral Chun, took over the briefing. The level of operational detail these attacks required suggests someone with access to personnel files, mission schedules, and family information that should be available only to senior intelligence officials. Marcus studied the surveillance photos and tactical analyses with professional interest. What's the common thread? There has to be something connecting these 3 operations beyond just SEAL family members. NSA Representative Colonel Jennifer Hayes pulled up a new set of documents on the secure display. All 3 families had loved ones who participated in a classified operation in Syria 18 months ago. Operation Desert Shield was a joint mission involving multiple SEAL teams, Army Special Forces, and CIA operatives. Marcus felt his stomach tighten. He knew Operation Desert Shield. His import-export company had provided logistical support for that mission, supplying medical equipment and communications gear to the humanitarian teams that followed the military operation. It was the same mission Admiral Chen had mentioned during their conversation. The Syrian operation was considered highly successful, Colonel Hayes continued. We eliminated a major terrorist training facility and rescued 43 hostages, including several American contractors who had been held for months. But someone leaked operational details to surviving members of the terrorist organization. Agent Chen added, the Return Blade appears to be composed of survivors from that facility, along with new recruits seeking revenge for the deaths of their leaders. They've spent 18 months planning these revenge attacks. Admiral Chun looked directly at Marcus. That's where our liaison comes in. We need someone who understands special operations but can work outside official channels to identify and eliminate the security breach. Sandra Walsh frowned. Admiral, with all due respect, this is a matter for professional intelligence services. How exactly is a civilian supposed to investigate operational security failures? Admiral Chin's expression didn't change. Our liaison has unique qualifications that make him ideally suited for this mission. I suggest we focus on providing him with the information and support he needs rather than questioning his credentials. Marcus decided to take control of the conversation. What I need is complete access to personnel records for everyone who had knowledge of Operation Desert Shield. I also need detailed security protocols for all SEAL families, current threat assessments, and authorization to implement enhanced protection measures immediately. Colonel Hayes looked skeptical. Some of that information is classified beyond typical civilian access levels. Then, get it declassified or find another way to make it available. Marcus replied with the kind of authority he'd used when dealing with bureaucratic obstacles during his active duty career. People are dying because someone in your agencies is feeding information to terrorists. I can't fix the problem if I don't have access to the data. Agent Shun leaned forward. Assuming you get that access, what's your plan? Marcus had been thinking about this since Admiral Chun first described the threat. First, we implement immediate enhanced security for all families connected to Operation Desert Shield. 24-hour protection details, secure communication protocols, and relocation to safe houses if necessary. Second, we trace the information flow from the original operation to identify potential leak sources. Third, we set up surveillance on suspected compromised personnel to identify the actual source. That's going to be expensive and resource-intensive, Sandra Walsh pointed out. More expensive than losing SEAL operators because they're worried about their families instead of focusing on their missions. Marcus shot back. More resource-intensive than dealing with the security implications if word gets out that we can't protect our own people's families. Admiral Chen nodded approvingly. Our liaison makes a valid point. The cost of prevention is always lower than the cost of dealing with successful attacks. Colonel Hayes pulled up another document. There's something else you should know. We've intercepted communications suggesting the return blade has identified additional targets. They're planning something they call the Final Blade, a coordinated attack on multiple family members simultaneously. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed this information. Marcus felt the familiar cold focus that had served him well during his most dangerous missions. When intelligence suggests within the next 2 weeks, possibly sooner. They're waiting for several SEAL teams to deploy on upcoming operations, so the psychological impact will be maximum. Marcus stood up. Then, we don't have time for bureaucratic delays. I need that information today, and I need authorization to begin enhanced protection immediately. He looked around the table at each representative. I also need each of your agencies to assign a senior officer to work directly with me on this. Someone with authority to cut through red tape and access classified systems. Agent Shun was the first to respond. FBI will provide full support. I'll assign Agent Patricia Williams from our counterterrorism division. Sandra Walsh nodded reluctantly. CIA will cooperate. You'll work with Operations Officer Michael Torres. Colonel Hayes looked to Admiral Chun, who gave her an encouraging nod. NSA will provide technical support and communications intercept analysis. You'll coordinate with Senior Analyst Robert Kim. Admiral Chun closed her folder. Excellent. Our liaison will establish operations headquarters at a secure facility off base. All coordination will go through his team to maintain operational security. She turned to Marcus. What's your first priority? Immediate protection for the families most at risk. Based on the intelligence pattern, anyone connected to Operation Desert Shield needs security details starting today. After that, we start tracing the leak. As the meeting broke up, the various agency representatives began discussing logistical details with their headquarters. Marcus found himself momentarily alone with Admiral Chun. Master Chief, she said quietly, I know this isn't the retirement you planned, but You may be the only person who can stop these attacks. Understood, Admiral. But I want to be clear about something. Once we identify and neutralize this threat, I go back to being Marcus Rodriguez permanently. This is a one-time return to active status. Agreed. But Marcus, be careful. If the return blade has access to information about Operation Desert Shield, they may know about your involvement in providing logistical support. Your cover identity could be compromised. Marcus had been thinking the same thing. That's why I need to move fast. If they figure out who I really am, this operation becomes exponentially more dangerous. Admiral Chun handed him a secure phone and a set of credentials that identified him as a Department of Defense security specialist. These will get you access to any facility or resource you need. The phone connects directly to my office, and I'll be monitoring the situation around the clock. Thank you, Admiral. I won't let you down. I know you won't, Master Chief. But remember, you're not doing this alone this time. You have the full resources of the United States intelligence community backing you up. As Marcus left the secure facility, his mind was already working through operational plans and priority lists. 24 hours ago, he'd been Marcus Rodriguez, successful businessman attending a barbecue with his SEAL friends. Now he was Master Chief Santos again, responsible for preventing a coordinated terrorist attack on American military families. The transition felt both foreign and familiar, like putting on an old uniform that still fit perfectly despite the years that had passed. Marcus had spent 3 years trying to convince himself that he could be satisfied with a quiet civilian life. Now, faced with a mission that demanded everything he'd learned during 21 years of special operations, he realized how much he'd missed the clarity of purpose that came with serving something larger than himself. His first stop would be establishing a secure operations center. Then, he would begin the delicate process of identifying which families needed immediate protection while simultaneously hunting for the source of the security leak that was getting people killed. Marcus Rodriguez had been a successful fiction, a necessary cover that allowed him to heal and find peace after a difficult retirement. But Master Chief Santos was who he really was, and it was time to prove that 3 years of civilian life hadn't dulled the skills that had made him one of the most effective special operations personnel in the history of the program. The hunt for the return blade was about to begin. Marcus established his operations center in a nondescript office building in downtown San Diego, far enough from any military installation to avoid surveillance, but close enough to respond quickly to developments. The space had been used by federal agencies before. It came equipped with secure communication lines, electromagnetic shielding, and multiple escape routes. Within 48 hours, his team was operational. Agent Patricia Williams from the FBI proved to be as sharp as her reputation suggested, with an encyclopedic knowledge of domestic terrorist networks and the bureaucratic skills to cut through interagency red tape. CIA Operations Officer Michael Torres brought street-level experience from years of running assets in hostile territories, while NSA Senior Analyst Robert Kim provided technical capabilities that seemed almost magical in their sophistication. "We've got a problem," Patricia announced during their morning briefing on the third day. She spread surveillance photos across the conference table. 3 families have gone off the grid. The Hendersons in Norfolk, the Castellis in Phoenix, and the Yamadas in Seattle. All have family members who participated in Operation Desert Shield. Marcus studied the photos. Define off the grid. They're not answering phones, not showing up for work, and their neighbors report seeing them leave their homes with suitcases at unusual hours. Either they're running scared, or someone has taken them. Michael Torres pulled up intercept reports on his laptop. Agency sources suggest the return blade has accelerated their timeline. Something spooked them, and now they're moving faster than expected. Marcus felt the familiar tightness in his chest that came with operations that were spiraling beyond control. "Bob, what's the latest from Signals Intelligence?" Robert Kim adjusted his glasses and consulted his tablet. "We've identified 3 communication nodes that the return blade has been using to coordinate their activities. All 3 went silent 6 hours ago, which suggests they're either implementing their final operation or they've discovered we're monitoring them. Or both," Patricia added grimly. Marcus walked to the window overlooking the busy San Diego street below. Somewhere out there, terrorist operatives were moving against American families while he sat in a conference room analyzing intelligence reports. It reminded him of the frustrating aspects of special operations, the gap between knowing something was wrong and being able to do something about it. "We need to change our approach," he announced, turning back to the team. "Passive intelligence gathering isn't working fast enough. We need to force them to react to us instead of always being one step behind." Michael looked interested. "What did you have in mind?" "We're going to leak information that suggests we've identified their next target. But the target we leak will be false. It will be a trap." Patricia frowned. "That's extremely risky. If we're wrong about their information source, we could be putting innocent people in danger." "We're already putting innocent people in danger by moving too slowly," Marcus replied. "At least this way, we control the circumstances." Robert Kim was already typing on his tablet. "I can design the false intelligence to make it appear credible while ensuring it points to a location where we can control all variables. An empty safe house, perhaps, with full surveillance coverage. Good. But we need to make sure the bait is attractive enough that they'll commit significant resources to the operation." Marcus turned to Michael. "Can your agency provide a fake family that appears to be connected to Operation Desert Shield?" "Absolutely. We have operatives who can play a convincing military family, complete with backstory and documentation that will hold up under scrutiny." Patricia was warming to the idea. "If we do this right, we can not only identify their operational team, but also trace their intelligence source. We set up the false target, monitor who accesses the information, and track the communication paths." Exactly. Marcus felt the satisfaction that came with a plan that moved from defensive to offensive posture. "But we need to move fast. If 3 families have already disappeared, the return blade is implementing their endgame." Over the next 8 hours, Marcus's team constructed an elaborate deception operation. Robert Kim created false intelligence reports suggesting that Chief Petty Officer David Morrison and his family, actually deep-cover CIA operatives, were residing in a safe house in Riverside County. The reports indicated that Morrison had been a key participant in Operation Desert Shield and that his family was being relocated due to security concerns. Patricia arranged for the false intelligence to be inserted into multiple classified databases, ensuring that anyone with access to SEAL personnel information would be able to discover the Morrison family's supposed location. Meanwhile, Michael's CIA team prepared the safe house with sophisticated surveillance equipment and positioned response teams at strategic locations throughout the area. "The beauty of this plan," Robert explained as they reviewed the operational details, "is that we'll be able to track not just who accesses the information, but when they access it and from what terminals. If there's a leak in the system, we'll identify it within hours of the terrorists taking the bait." Marcus reviewed the tactical arrangements one final time. The safe house was positioned in a suburban neighborhood with excellent sight lines and multiple access routes. The fake family would appear to be living normal lives, while heavily armed backup teams remained hidden nearby. Communication intercepts would monitor all terrorist networks for signs that they were planning to move against the Morrison family. One concern Patricia raised: what if they don't take the bait? What if they stick with their original targets? "Then we'll have learned something valuable about their operational discipline," Marcus replied. "And we'll still have the surveillance data showing who accessed the false information." Michael checked his secure phone. "The safe house is ready, and our operatives are in position. The Morrison family is officially in residence as of 30 minutes ago." "Excellent. Bob, how long before the false intelligence becomes accessible through normal channels?" "It's already propagating through the classified networks. Anyone with appropriate clearance levels should be able to access it within the next 2 hours." Marcus felt the familiar anticipation that came with launching an operation after days of planning. "Then we wait. Patricia, I want round-the-clock monitoring of all database access. Michael, make sure your response teams are ready to move at a moment's notice. Bob, keep scanning for any communication traffic that suggests they're planning to move." The waiting began. In Marcus's experience, this was often the most difficult part of any operation, the period when planning was complete, but results remained uncertain. He used the time to review personnel files for everyone who had been involved in Operation Desert Shield, looking for patterns or connections that previous analysts might have missed. At 3:47 a.m., Robert Kim's monitoring equipment detected unusual activity. "Marcus, we've got something. Someone just accessed the Morrison family information from a terminal at Naval Special Warfare Command. Can you identify who?" "Working on it." The access came from the administrative offices, using valid credentials belonging to... Robert paused, checking his screen. "Lieutenant Commandant Sarah Phillips, Personnel Administration." Patricia was already pulling up Phillips's background information. She's been with the command for 4 years, has access to all SEAL family information for security coordination purposes. Clean record, no obvious red flags. But she's working at 3:47 a.m., accessing information about a family that was just relocated, Michael pointed out. That's not exactly normal administrative behavior. Marcus felt pieces of the puzzle beginning to fall into place. "Bob, can you track whether Phillips's credentials have been used to access information about the other families that were attacked?" "Give me a few minutes." Robert's fingers flew across his keyboard. "Yes. Her credentials were used to access personnel information about all 3 previous target families within 48 hours of each attack. Could be someone using her credentials without her knowledge," Patricia suggested. "Or she's our leak," Marcus replied grimly. "Either way, we need to move carefully. If Phillips is working with the return blade, she'll be monitoring for any signs that we've identified her." Michael's phone buzzed with an incoming message. "CIA Signals Intelligence has detected increased communication traffic on the terrorist networks. They're definitely planning something, and the timing suggests they're responding to the information about the Morrison family. How long do we have?" "Based on previous attack patterns, probably less than 24 hours. They seem to prefer moving quickly once they've identified a target." Marcus made a decision that would have been difficult for someone without his operational experience. "We're going to let them come. We'll monitor Lieutenant Commander Phillips to see if she's actively cooperating with them or if her credentials are being used without her knowledge. Meanwhile, we prepare for the possibility that the return blade will attempt to attack the Morrison family safe house." Patricia looked concerned. "That puts our undercover operatives at significant risk. They're trained for this kind of operation, and they'll have extensive backup. More importantly, it's our best chance to capture terrorists and identify the full extent of the intelligence leak." Marcus turned to each team member. "I want continuous surveillance on Phillips starting immediately. I want every communication channel monitored for signs of terrorist movement. And I want our response teams ready to deploy within minutes of detecting any hostile activity." "Understood," Michael replied. "What about you? What's your role in this?" Marcus had been thinking about that question since they'd begun planning the operation. As Master Chief Santos, he was qualified to participate in direct action against terrorist operatives. But as Marcus Rodriguez, civilian liaison, he was supposed to coordinate and observe rather than engage in combat operations. "I'll be at the safe house," he announced. "If the return blade takes the bait, I want to be in position to ensure our people get home safely." Patricia smiled for the first time since the operation began. "I was hoping you'd say that. Something tells me our undercover operatives will feel a lot better knowing they have a genuine Master Chief watching their backs." As his team dispersed to their respective monitoring positions, Marcus felt the familiar weight of operational responsibility settling on his shoulders. In less than 24 hours, he would discover whether 3 years of civilian life had dulled his combat instincts. He would also learn whether Master Chief Santos still had what it took to protect the people depending on him. The hunt for the return blade was entering its final phase. The safe house in Riverside County looked exactly like what it was supposed to be, a modest suburban home where a military family was trying to live a normal life despite security concerns. Marcus positioned himself in the house across the street, which the CIA had discreetly evacuated and equipped with surveillance equipment that would make most intelligence agencies envious. Through his scope, Marcus could see CIA operatives David Morrison and Linda Morrison going through the motions of family life. They were good, natural enough in their interactions that any observer would believe they were actually married, professional enough in their situational awareness that Marcus felt confident they could handle themselves if things went wrong. At 11:30 p.m., Robert Kim's voice crackled through Marcus's earpiece. "We've got movement. Surveillance teams have identified at least 6 individuals taking positions around a neighborhood. They're moving with military-style coordination." "Patricia here," came another voice. "Lieutenant Commander Phillips left her apartment 20 minutes ago and is driving toward Riverside County. She's definitely involved." Marcus adjusted his position to get a better view of the street. "Michael, what's the status of our response teams?" "Alpha Team is positioned 2 blocks north, Bravo Team is south, and Charlie Team is mobile in unmarked vehicles. We have helicopter support standing by at March Air Force Base. Everyone's ready to move on your signal." The professional calm of coordinated operations felt familiar and comforting after 3 years away. Marcus found himself slipping effortlessly back into the mindset that had kept him alive during 21 years of dangerous missions. "Movement on the east side," reported one of the perimeter surveillance teams. 2 individuals with what appear to be explosive devices approaching the target house. Marcus could see them now through his scope. 2 men in dark clothing moving with the careful precision of experienced operatives. They were good, but not good enough to avoid detection by the comprehensive surveillance network Patricia's FBI team had established around the neighborhood. "Phillips just arrived," Patricia's voice reported. "She's parked 3 blocks away and appears to be coordinating with someone via radio." "Roger that. All teams maintain position until I give the signal." Marcus keyed his radio to the frequency the Morrison family was monitoring. "David, Linda, you've got company approaching from the east. 2 individuals with suspected explosive devices. Recommend you initiate emergency procedures." Inside the target house, Marcus could see the CIA operatives smoothly transitioning from their family role to their operational personas. They moved to predetermined positions that would give them tactical advantage while maintaining the appearance of a family responding to a perceived threat. Additional movement on the west side, another surveillance team reported. Vehicle approaching with at least 4 individuals inside. Marcus was beginning to understand the Return Blades' operational plan. They intended to hit the house from multiple directions simultaneously, using explosives to breach entry points while overwhelming any resistance with superior numbers. It was a solid tactical approach that would have worked against a genuine family with standard protection details. Unfortunately for the Return Blade, they were walking into a trap designed by some of the most experienced special operations and intelligence personnel in the world. "All teams, this is Marcus. The terrorists are moving into final positions. Wait for my signal, then execute simultaneous apprehension operations. I want as many of them alive as possible for interrogation." Through his scope, Marcus watched the terrorist operatives move closer to the house. They were confident, professional, and completely unaware that their every move was being monitored by multiple surveillance teams. He felt a familiar satisfaction at seeing a well-planned operation coming together. "Patricia, what's Phillips doing?" "She appears to be providing overwatch and communications coordination from her vehicle. She's definitely part of the operation." "Roger. Make sure she doesn't escape when this goes down." The terrorists were now in position around the house. Marcus could see the explosive devices being prepared, weapons being checked, and final coordination signals being passed between team members. It was time. "All teams, execute, execute, execute." The response was immediate and overwhelming. FBI tactical teams emerged from concealed positions around the neighborhood, while CIA security personnel moved to protect the Morrison family. Helicopters appeared overhead with searchlights that turned the suburban street into daylight, and Marcus could hear the distinctive sound of flashbang grenades being deployed. Through his scope, Marcus watched the terrorist operation collapse in real time. The operatives who had been so confident moments before found themselves surrounded by heavily armed federal agents. Most surrendered immediately when they realized the hopelessness of their situation. One terrorist, however, decided to fight rather than surrender. He raised his weapon toward the house where he believed the Morrison family was located, apparently intending to complete his mission even if it meant his own death. Marcus didn't hesitate. 3 years of civilian life hadn't dulled his reflexes or his marksmanship. His rifle shot took the terrorist center mass, dropping him before he could fire at the house. It was a clean shot, professionally executed, exactly the kind of precise application of force that had made Master Chief Santos legendary within the Special Operations community. Threat neutralized, Marcus reported calmly. All teams sound off. Alpha Team, all targets secured. Bravo Team, perimeter secure. Charlie Team, vehicle occupants in custody. Patricia here, Phillips is in custody. She tried to run when the operation began, but didn't get far. Marcus lowered his rifle and felt the familiar mixture of satisfaction and exhaustion that came with successful completion of a high-stakes operation. The immediate threat was over, but the investigation was just beginning. 2 hours later, Marcus sat in the interrogation observation room, watching Patricia conduct preliminary questioning of Lieutenant Commander Sarah Phillips. The naval officer had maintained her innocence for the first hour, claiming she had been coerced into providing information by threats against her family. The problem with your story, Patricia explained patiently, is that we have electronic evidence showing you've been in communication with terrorist operatives for over 6 months. This wasn't coercion. This was deliberate collaboration. Phillips finally broke down and admitted her involvement. Her brother had been killed in Afghanistan 2 years earlier, and she blamed Special Operations Forces for what she considered reckless missions that got good soldiers killed unnecessarily. The Return Blade had approached her through online forums where she had expressed anti-military sentiments, offering her money and the opportunity for revenge. How many other people are involved in the intelligence leak? Patricia pressed. Just me, Phillips insisted. I was their only source inside Naval Special Warfare Command. Marcus wasn't entirely convinced, but the electronic evidence seemed to support her claim. The investigation would continue for weeks to ensure no other leaks existed, but the immediate threat appeared to be neutralized. Admiral Chun arrived at the operations center as the last of the terrorists were being transported to federal detention facilities. She found Marcus reviewing after-action reports in the conference room. "Outstanding work, Master Chief," she said, extending her hand. 5 terrorists in custody, the intelligence leak identified and closed, and no casualties among our people. That's exactly the outcome we needed. Thank you, Admiral. But we still need to locate the 3 families that disappeared. They're probably being held at secondary locations. Already in progress. 2 of the captured terrorists are cooperating in exchange for reduced sentences. We expect to have locations within the next 12 hours. Marcus felt a weight lifting from his shoulders that had been there since Admiral Chun first approached him at the barbecue 4 days earlier. And after we recover those families? Admiral Chun smiled. After that, Master Chief Santos goes back into retirement, and Marcus Rodriguez returns to his successful import-export business and his enthusiastic support of SEAL teams. Understood, Admiral. There's one thing, though, Admiral Chun continued. Your performance during this operation has reminded everyone why you were considered one of the best. If you ever decide you want to come back permanently, there are positions available that would make full use of your capabilities. Marcus considered the offer for a moment. The past 4 days had reminded him how much he missed the clarity of purpose that came with special operations work, the satisfaction of protecting people who couldn't protect themselves, the brotherhood of working with professionals who shared his commitment to something larger than themselves. But he also thought about his nephew Danny, about the peaceful life he'd built as Marcus Rodriguez, about the promise he'd made to himself to stay away from the world that had nearly killed him 3 years earlier. Thank you for the offer, Admiral, but I think I'll stick with the original plan. Marcus Rodriguez has a good life, and Master Chief Santos has done his final mission. Admiral Chun nodded approvingly. I thought you might say that, but remember, the offer stands if you ever change your mind. As Admiral Chun left, Marcus began the process of transitioning back to his civilian identity. He would remain involved in the operation until all 3 missing families were recovered safely, But after that, he would return to being the successful businessman and enthusiastic SEAL supporter that everyone at the barbecue believed him to be. The difference was that now, people like Admiral Chen knew the truth about who Marcus Rodriguez really was. They had seen Master Chief Santos in action, had watched him plan and execute an operation that saved lives and neutralized a significant threat to American military families. Marcus Rodriguez would continue attending SEAL events and organizing fundraisers, but he would do so knowing that he had earned the respect of the people he admired most. When Admiral Chun looked at him across a crowd at future barbecues, she would see not just an enthusiastic civilian supporter, but a warrior who had proven himself worthy of the brotherhood he supported. 3 days later, Marcus was back at his import-export business, reviewing shipping manifests and coordinating deliveries. To anyone watching, he appeared to be exactly what he claimed to be, a successful businessman with an unusual interest in supporting military families. But the secure phone in his desk drawer connected him directly to Admiral Chen's office, and the credentials in his safe identified him as a Department of Defense security specialist with unlimited authority. Marcus Rodriguez had returned to his peaceful civilian life, but Master Chief Santos remained ready to answer the call if his country needed him again. For the first time since his retirement, Marcus had found the perfect balance between the man he needed to be and the warrior he would always remain.